All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another online class. I'm sorry I'm not there in person this week, but I hope that opening up some time Wednesday evening for some work time ends up being good for you all. So want to start off by just previewing what we're doing, where information is located, hopefully make the Brightspace navigation piece of this a little bit easier. Everything that I'm going over today is in this week 6 online module section of the content area of Brightspace. It's kind of broken down into the steps that we'll be doing. So first of all, you had 3 very short readings due this week, and they're listed here: environmental factors, building independence, and behavior goals. Throughout this webinar, I'm going to be referencing several different resources, and so just so you know, those are all linked here for resources to reference. I'll be pulling them up on my screen, but if you want to revisit them later or be looking at them on your own time, they're here as well. So we're going to do this webinar, reference these resources, and then there will be 2 kind of short write-ups to submit for your attendance and participation, and to help prepare you for your case study assignments. These are really linked to what you're going to be writing up for your signature assignment anyways, so it should be connected and be a good use of time in terms of, you know, the fact that you'll be able to use it for that assignment. So to jump in, we're going to start by kind of going over the case study assignment. Just to revisit it, make sure you're on track. Not next class, but the following class, we have basically a whole class of facilitated work time, question and answer time. So that's going to be a really important time to bring a lot of this information, because you can work on it in class with peers, ask me questions. So I want to make sure that you're set up to be able to come to class prepared for that. So just to review, in terms of the data that you're going to be collecting for your behavior assessment and case study, there's going to be 2 different kind of sets of data you need. One is the baseline data, so how often and how badly is the behavior happening. You do not need to collect frequency, duration, and intensity baseline data. You're probably going to pick 1, maybe 2. It's going to be up to you, depending on what you think is most appropriate for your student. You're also going to want to get some data around the function of the behavior to help you kind of hypothesize the function. So you're going to definitely need ABC data, that antecedent behavior consequence, as well as interviews, which is built into the assignment as well. If you want to, there are those additional worksheets, like the motivation assessment scale, that helps kind of you figure out what the function might be. So those are optional. You can use them if you want to, but you don't have to. The steps you're going to be going through, at least for this first piece of the assignment, is to, and I'll say the ones in red are things that hopefully you've already done or are working on. The purple ones should really be done within the next, 2 weeks. And then this last one is kind of just an as-needed thing. So identify the student, decide on the target behavior, so operationally defining the behavior, coming up with a really specific targeted definition for what behavior you're focusing on. It's okay if there's more than one behavior, as long as they all kind of cluster together within the same general definition. So a tantrum or an outburst might include swearing, ripping up papers, and pushing desks over. So there's 3 separate behaviors, but they all fall under the cluster of an outburst or a tantrum for maybe a younger student. You do not want to focus on several completely separate behaviors, like classroom disruption, like blurting out in class, and eloping or leaving the classroom space. Those are 2 separate behaviors. They don't really cluster together, unless they're always happening at the same time. A student always blurts out and then leaves. Like, maybe that would then be part of like an outburst. But in general, keeping it contained to a similar cluster of behaviors that all happen together and at the same time. So once you decide the behavior you're focusing on, you're going to do some interviews with other teachers and the parents, maybe the student themselves, about when and where and why they think the behavior happens, what's worked, what hasn't worked, some of the history, and there's actually 2 different templates for interviews on Brightspace that you can use if you want to. You don't have to, but they're there for your guidance. So once you've done the interviews, you've figured out the target behavior, it's when you're going to do some of those direct observations and working with potentially other staff to gather some data. So you're going to observe the student at least twice for 30 minutes. If you feel like your case, there would be an exception to that, feel free to let me know and we can talk about it. You might be using more teacher interview data or other things, but in general, 2 30-minute observations to collect the baseline data, see what's actually happening, and then also getting some of that ABC data. So you might get that during your direct observation, or you might ask other teachers and staff to fill out some of those ABC forms, fill out Google Excel sheets, or just get that through interview data as well. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. And then if you feel like you want or need more, you might use some of those additional forms to help figure out the function. You might interview the student, etc. Let me back up here, and I'm going to pull up the actual template for the case study assignment. Well, here is our template in the syllabus. Here we go. So where you'll see these things, let's go side by side. This is the template for the case study assignment. So here's where there's some information about the interview of stakeholders, what should be included, the observations, where we see, at least 2 30-minute observations, summary of the educational setting and the environment, which is something we're focusing on today. So that is coming, the operational definition, the baseline, the hypothesized function. So all of these things that we're talking about are built in here into the template. So feel free to look to the template if that's helpful. What's actually due in terms of your assignment is on March 17th, part 1 of the signature assignment is due. So part 1 of this case study assignment covers sections 1 through 6. So that means the background information through observations and data collection, it's actually sections 1 through 5. Good thing I'm here to correct this. All the way up through the proposed plan. So you'll be collecting data and putting a plan together for part 1. Part 2 then is actually going to be the progress of how the plan worked and your reflections of the results. So part 1 is just the student demographic information. Who are they? What grade are they in? What's their disability? Section 2 is the rationale for the behavior support plan. So if it's a brand new behavior plan that we're putting together, why do they need it? How is it impacting the learning of themselves or the peers around them? If they already have a behavior plan, your rationale might include some evidence that the behavior plan isn't working, and then also, how the behavior is impacting the learning of self or others. Then you're going to have your data, your record reviews, what has the student had behavior problems before, how far back does this go, have they had counseling, what other services have they gotten to address this, your interviews, your observations. Then you're going to put in what the definition of the behavior is, the baseline, what you think the function is, and then your analysis of the environment, and then finally your proposed intervention plan. We are not really at a place of being able to pull together the proposed intervention plan. We're going to be getting to that content partially through this webinar, partially through our next several classes, so don't worry if you don't feel ready for this, but really you should be at a place to at least get sections 1, 2, and 3 done, and be kind of starting to work on section 4, though there might be more information or conversations to have there. So then that's 1 month from now. 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a big chunk of work time and Q&A time in class, so come prepared for that. At the very, very end of the semester is when part 2 is due, which is the analysis of how the plan worked. Okay. One other thing I'm actually going to point out, so many tabs. Here is, we have several sample case study assignments on Brightspace. I've linked this one to the actual module for this week, and just to kind of give you a sense of what this actually looks like in terms of some of the content we're going to be talking about today too. So the background information is pretty straightforward. Eligibility, services, this is not a big comprehensive chunk. Rationale for the behavior support plan. What's the problem behavior? How is it impacting learning? Record review, interviews, observations, definition, baseline, impact again, hypothesized function, and then we get into environmental conditions, right? And so this is what we're focusing on today. It's kind of like what's going on in the classroom that's maybe triggering the behavior, or what does the student need that they don't currently have in the classroom that's contributing to the behavior. So in this case, it looks like the student found that the student really needs but doesn't have some visual supports, doesn't have sentence starters and sentence frames to help with his work, doesn't really have a break space to be in, and when the schedule changes, that seems to be a trigger too. So when we actually kind of start thinking about the intervention plan, there should be a direct mapping of what's missing in the environment or triggering in the environment, and then what do we want to change about the environment. So we obviously want to build in the visual supports, the sentence frames, the peer supports, etc. This is, a sample from a previous student. It's not necessarily 100% perfect, but I think it's a good example of how this assignment kind of breaks down and what it looks like. You'll also notice that there's a section in here on goal development, and there was a reading due this week about writing goals for behavior plans. So it's just like writing an IEP goal for academics, pretty much. One thing I will say is that we always are going to write a goal around using the functionally equivalent replacement behavior. So if the replacement behavior is to, rather than shutting down or leaving the classroom, it's to raise his hand or write down his comment or question. We want to write a goal that shows that he's actually using this new skill we're teaching. What's the point of teaching a skill if the student never uses it? So we want to have a goal showing that they're using that new skill. We then also can choose one or the other of increasing a positive behavior like work completion and time on task, kind of how we want this behavior change to positively impact the student's learning overall, or a decrease in challenging behavior. If the student's physically aggressive, we want them to decrease their physical aggression. If the student leaves class 5 times a day, we want them to reduce that to maybe no more than once a day or once a week. This student wrote in both, so they have a FIRB goal, an increase in positive behavior goal, and a decrease in challenging behavior goal. You don't have to go quite that far, but you definitely need the FIRB goal, and then you need one or the other of these to kind of show, in general, are we seeing improvements in their actual behavior in class? So we'll talk more about that. I just want to preview that for you so that you can be thinking about these things and you can be starting to piece together a draft of your report. And so that's there for you to be able to get started. But for today, we are talking about environmental modifications. We touched on this a little bit last week in terms of thinking about what's really the difference between teaching a new skill to the student and modifying the environment to support them. Both are very important, both are equally important, but we really want to be aware of them as two different things. So when we're talking about environmental modifications, what is going on in the classroom or the school that is working for the student, that's helping them improve their behavior? What supports or tools do we have in place that we should keep doing? And then what's not working? What's missing? What's triggering the student? So it's really, this piece is all about what can adults do proactively to set up an environment that's going to set the student up for success. So we have teaching the student behavior is really giving them the skills that they need to be successful in advocating for themselves. But then we as adults also have the responsibility to be setting up an environment so that they have what they need. We're going to watch a quick video clip of a professional in the field sort of talking about different proactive strategies. And I want to bring back this visual to sort of frame what we're talking about. When we're talking about behavior, we know that there's always there might be some things going on personally or at home for the student, but then there's always going to be something going on at school, something in the environment, socially, that triggers the student, whether it's conflict with a peer, being given difficult work, being in a overly sensory stimulating situation that triggers the behavior happens, and then we somehow respond to that behavior. When we're talking about environmental modifications, we're talking about changing things here on the front end to reduce the chance that the behavior happens. How can we reduce the likelihood of the student being triggered? How can we set them up proactively to not need to exhibit the problem behavior? So let's listen to our friend here. Where did she go? Putting in a plug for her book. But a nice little break from me talking. So some ideas of things that could happen ahead of time to better prepare a student before they would have a challenging behavior, or intervene when we know that looking at a lot of work is going to be challenging, or giving an assignment is going to be challenging. Some things we can immediately do before the behavior to reduce the likelihood that it's going to happen, or happen to the severity that it sometimes does, right? So there's a resource on Brightspace. It's related to the one that we looked at last week, and it's all about different environmental factors that could be helpful for students broken down into the function. So take several minutes and pull this resource up and really look through it. Oh, I thought I had it uploaded here, but I don't. It's this environmental factors list. So in thinking about either your case study student or maybe another student you have in mind, of course, not all of these are going to be a good fit for that student, as antecedent interventions or environmental modifications. We're really talking about the same thing with both of those terms, but it can give you some ideas and maybe a starting place, right? So it starts off with students who might be acting out to escape. So there's ways to change the assignment, change the schedule, emotional supports. Then we have it for attention and sensory needs. So definitely take some time to look through this to gather some more ideas. It's all about building up our toolkit. For future kids we might need to do this with as well. So feel free to pause and look through this now. When you're back, if you're back, when we're talking about environmental modifications, also be thinking about what accommodations or supplementary aids are written into the IEP. This is really where this piece fits in. These are not direct services. This is not direct teaching, but it's adaptations or accommodations or materials we put in place in the classroom to help students be better successful. So we're really thinking about here, you know, like what's the trigger? What can we put in place to reduce the likelihood of the triggering event or help the student cope better? Some ideas and samples that you'll see in several lists, and here's some visual supports too. Within the classroom physical space itself is looking at the seating arrangement, where the student sits, who they're sitting next to, how close they are to the teacher or to the door, a cool down space or a place to go to relax. We might have physical items like some sensory items, some flexible seating options, some TheraBands to let students move their feet while they're sitting and thinking, or sensory tools, visual schedules, visual first then charts, timers, planners, checklists. So a lot of these might look more appropriate for younger students, and that's true. There's maybe ways to attach them for older students. We might even have posters or visuals on the desk or on the wall to remind students of some emotional regulation skills. So any of these that would be available and accessible in the classroom would be environmental modifications or supplementary aids that we would want to consider to better set the student up to be successful. We also want to think about the schedule. Is the student getting hungry during the day? Do they need snacks? Do they need breaks built in? Do they need opportunities to move around and maybe have jobs? When it comes to transitions, if the hallways in the classroom is really chaotic, we want them to transition to the next class several minutes before or several minutes after the masses of students come through the hallway. And then, as we just heard in the video, there might be adaptations to the actual assignments themselves, whether that's independent work folders or different activity binders that students could go to, a communication system to non-verbally show if they need help, and thinking, of course, about, you know, our UDL strategies and how to provide multiple ways for students to learn and multiple ways to show what they know. We also might want to think about removing temptations or triggers, right? So having window coverings if there's going to be really distracting things happening outside, having privacy spaces set up if visual distractions are hard, seeing if it's possible for you or the school to block really tempting websites on computers, or to actually lock up certain parts of the classroom if getting into materials is really tempting or triggering. So environmental support's not the same as teaching new skills. I mean, there's some elements of teaching usually and how we would transition or how we would use a skill or a tool potentially, but it's more about putting physical items, visual supports, or accommodations in place to make the environment more successful rather than really focusing on the student taking the initiative to build their own internal skill set. So what this looks like if we actually apply it to a real case study, this is also up on Brightspace. Diana Browning Wright does pretty much all of the materials for behavior plans. It's how schools usually structure their behavior plans is based off of her materials. And so she took a case study of a second grade student where they kind of describe what the problem behavior is and looks like and what's going on in the classroom. And she shows her interpretation of what might need to happen environmentally to better support this student. So I'm not going to read through it, obviously, word for word, but I think it's worth looking at to see how an expert would really approach a case from this lens of considering the environment. So in some ways, too, it's her saying, like, no, actually, the classroom physical space seems good. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of problems there. Not a lot of, social interactions that are problematic. But maybe we see that her instructional materials are not quite the right match for her. And so that's causing some agitation and that's causing her to really protest or want to avoid academic work. We might also see something with her schedule, maybe needing more breaks, more chunking in her work. And then there's a summary at the end of the conclusion of, based on this student's behavior and their classroom setup and structure, what would be the focus areas for how to make some environmental modifications. So I do encourage you to skim through this. It's only a few pages, but it's worth getting inside the mind of someone who's analyzing this as a model. There's one more resource I want to direct you to. We'll be using it next week as well, but I really do love this. It's about how to support students with mental health needs in the classroom. And by mental health needs, I could have sworn I had all of these pulled up. Here it is. It really breaks it down to anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, which might be less common, but you may have students struggling with that in your classroom, as well as ADHD. So this is geared towards teachers, and it really gives you classroom strategies, things you can set up in your classroom or skills to teach to better set up a positive classroom environment for students struggling with some of these different mental health symptoms. So here's the few pages on anxiety. And it breaks it down more specifically if it's helpful, right? Anxiety is not all the same. We have perfectionism, fear of large assignments, testing anxiety. Then we get to depression. And there's several pages on different symptoms we might see of depression with what teachers can do within the classroom. Now, this does not replace obviously counseling or mental health services or therapy, but it does help create a more appropriate, successful classroom environment. Here's where we have the pages on bipolar disorder. Did I miss one? And then on page 11, probably one of the more common ones is going to be attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. So students struggling more with ADHD type symptoms. So I do want you to take some time looking through this one. Print it if you want. If you need me to print it, let me know and I will. But one of the things that you're going to submit as part of your participation for this class is looking at that environmental factors list from Ventura County. It was this one that I pulled up on Brightspace. Look through this list and also look through the mental health needs list. So you're going to pull up those two resources. And then based on a student that you select, it might be your case study student, but it could be a different student. Either way, just pick one student. You're going to provide a quick summary of the challenging behavior, why you think it's happening, and if there are mental health related challenges or ADHD related symptoms. So just one short paragraph. And then I want you to list 10 possible environmental modifications that you get from one of these two resources. Now, it would be a lot for any teacher to implement all 10 at the same time, but the purpose behind this is just to really, like I said, build out your toolbox. It doesn't mean you're going to do all of these. It just means that you're trying to pull out and get creative with any of the ones that might be a good fit, because it's always going to be a little bit of trial and error. So for example, what this might look like is one of the supports that you pull out of these lists is the sensory band around the base of the chair, and then your rationale for that might be that the student has a high need for movement. You might pull out that you're gonna the strategy of reducing the amount of work required or allowing, for different ways to submit work. And your rationale for that is that you believe the student is seeking to escape from challenging work. So I want to see you finding several ideas that might be a good fit and also providing the justification for that. This is uploaded on Brightspace, but this can be the template that you use. So based on, these two lists, write up your brief overview of the student, and then just put in the 10 different strategies you pull out and the rationale. And you'll submit that as one of the activities for this week. The one other activity, and I mentioned this several weeks ago, but we're coming back to it now, is that classroom analysis worksheet. So when we're looking at a behavior intervention plan or what's going on for a student, we are always analyzing what the classroom space is like, how is the classroom management, what's going on. So we're going to come back to that now. And I did pass this out, like I said, a bit ago. It looks like I'm going to have to pull it up. Hold on one second. Evaluation assignment. So it looks like this. I've uploaded this to Brightspace as well, but you're pretty much just going to quickly go through, reflect on your own classroom or on the classroom space of another class the student is in, and give a quick rating of, what is the classroom setup like in terms of crowding and distractions? How are the routines? Are there clear expectations? So you're going to just highlight you can either highlight the number or you can just delete this and write in your number. Doesn't matter to me. And then you're going to write a quick sentence or two on your evidence for that. So you might say, yes, there's several posters on the wall. The desks are set up in a U shape. Doesn't seem overly crowded. It's very organized. You might say, yes, there is a poster with the behavior expectations posted, and I know that they were taught and they're reviewed regularly. Or maybe there's no evidence for this, so you're going to rate it a 0 and say, I actually didn't observe this at all, or this hasn't been something that's been done. So you're just going to give those ratings and a quick explanation for why, and then pull out the 3 highest leverage steps the teacher should take, whether you're the teacher or someone else is the teacher, to improve that classroom environment. So looking at the areas that were rated lower and picking which are the 3 that would be the highest priority to focus on. So this is going to hopefully support all the students in the classroom with better classroom management, but also definitely the one student who's struggling. It's going to help identify what can be changed in that classroom environment to better support them. All right, we're going to quickly skim through reinforcement as well. This is an important topic, but I want to have a chance to preview it today so that when we come back to it in the upcoming weeks, we kind of have a foundation to come back to. So when we're talking about reinforcement within a behavior intervention plan, we're talking about reinforcing. I am spelling so many things wrong in here, aren't I? I apologize. Well, I'll clarify for you this way. Reinforcing, not reinforcing, the replacement behavior. So earlier we talked about positive reinforcements in terms of that 4-to-1 ratio with students, making sure we're acknowledging when students are meeting the behavior expectations. When we get to more of this tier 3 level of doing a full functional behavior assessment and creating a behavior intervention plan, we need to step up our reinforcement as well to make sure we're reinforcing the new behaviors and the replacement behaviors we're teaching the student. Otherwise, they're just going to revert back to those inappropriate behaviors because, hey, that's easier. It's what they're more ingrained with doing. So for example, if we have a student who elopes from class and we want them to request a break, we need to make sure we have a way to really heavily reinforce and praise and reward them when they do request that break, because that is them making a behavior change. They're going from what they used to do and what's really natural for them, putting the effort into doing this new thing that we're teaching them. So we need to make sure we really reward that. And all of this comes back to probably the things that you learned about in undergrad psych classes, right, with associating, different stimulus with different outcomes. So when something happens, if something really good happens right afterwards, I start to form that relationship. If I hear a bell and then I'm given food, whenever I hear that bell, I'm going to start salivating because I know food is coming. So we want students to really form the connection of when I do this behavior, something good happens for me, because that's going to strengthen the likelihood that they'll do that good behavior again. Right, and so there's different ways of changing behavior when this comes to like behavior modification. We have reinforcement and punishment, right? Positive reinforcement, we're adding something good because we want the behavior to increase. And then the other form of reinforcement is we're taking away something bad because we want the behavior to increase. So these are both actually ways of increasing a behavior we really want to see. Then there's also punishment, which is what we do when we maybe want a behavior to go down. So we might add something bad, reduce the behavior, or take away something good. All of these are behavior principles that would result in behavior change. When it comes to the school setting and positive behavior intervention plans, we really focus on these reinforcement principles much more than punishment. We know that punishment may work in the short term, but there can be some negative associations that come with that in terms of the relationship with the adult, the teacher who's working with the student, or students just tending to try to hide their behavior more so they don't get caught. What we really want to be doing is focusing more on these positive things of helping the replacement behaviors and the coping skills go up. So some examples: positive reinforcement, we're giving something good. That might be giving praise, it might be giving a sticker, it might be giving a dojo point, right? And so that's how we're positively reinforcing. For positive punishment, something we don't recommend doing in most cases, I wouldn't say all cases, but in most cases, is giving something bad with hopes that the behavior goes down. So you blurted out in class, I'm going to give you extra homework, would be a positive punishment. Negative reinforcement, this is one of the good ones. Something that we do want to use is, you do something good, okay, great, I'm going to take away something bad so that this feels like a good experience for you. You finished all your work in class, I'm going to take away your homework because I want to reinforce you doing your classwork more. So taking away something bad, usually taking away work, taking away demands, things like that are going to actually be really reinforcing for a student. Negative punishment, taking away something good, would be, I'm going to take away your phone, take away your computer. We definitely use these things in our general classroom management. It definitely fits in, but when it comes to a reinforcement plan within a behavior plan, make sure that you're focusing on these reinforcement principles more than punishment. Make sure you're doing things that are going to feel positive for a student to increase the likelihood of them doing the expected behavior or the replacement behavior. So a behavior occurs, we reinforce it, then that behavior is more likely to occur in the future. So if a student is demonstrating a coping skill or replacement behavior, we want to really reward that in some way, whether we're adding something good or taking away something bad, so that they're going to be more likely to use that behavior more in the future. We're revisiting this, right? There's a whole range of different ways we can reinforce, and these lower level ones are really powerful and impactful, but not going to be appropriate socially long term. So we're always also trying to move up this spectrum into some of these more socially appropriate, independent types of reinforcers. So let's go through some quick examples. Kind of starting on the lower end, we have our token economies, our star charts. Every time you do a behavior, you're going to get a star or a Velcro smiley face, and when you get to the end, you earn your reward. This is great. You know, this is kind of on this tangible to activity kind of side of things. It's really visual. So for our younger or lower functioning kids, really concrete, really powerful. Students then might graduate up to more of the tangible and social things. So they're earning coupons or, you know, dollars or points, and maybe they're able to cash those in at a student store, or, you know, when they fill up a certain, you know, container, the class or the student earns a prize. And so kind of like, you know, paychecks, we collect our points, we collect our money, our bank account gets bigger, and then we can go purchase the things that we want. These would be other types of reinforcement systems. So we would want to be giving these dollars or points or, you know, whatever to students when they're demonstrating appropriate behaviors in class, but then also definitely when they're doing that replacement behavior that we're trying to get them to learn and start applying. Socially, we might do something like shout outs, positive phone calls home, positive notes home, anything that would, you know, generate praise or recognition from others. A lot of these you'll all notice, much easier to do with the elementary population, maybe into middle school, but as we get into high school, it feels kind of cheesy and like kids aren't going to be really all that into it, which is very fair. So as we especially get into older students, we need to be thinking about things that are more meaningful and reinforcing to them. Maybe getting out of homework, maybe getting to have some social time with a preferred teacher or staff member, getting to listen to music, or just getting free time, all might be ways we can reinforce older students in ways that are actually really reinforcing for them. So here's some ideas for older students. I think when we meet next time, I'd be interested to know what you high school teachers do to reinforce your students. And it might even just be praise, you know, any kind of positive attention for that student, potentially. Some students don't want that positive attention, so that's not going to be reinforcing for them, but there's definitely a variety of ways to build it in a more natural way for older students. And there's a variety of different levels of reinforcement we can give. We can do things that are really immediate, like giving a candy or a cracker or a goldfish or praise in the moment, up to giving tokens that add up to a break or reward. So they have to be able to wait the 15, 30, or 45 minutes to fill up that chart. It might be regular check-ins, midday, at the end of class, at the end of the day, or it could even be up to earning, having to go a certain number of days to earn a reward. So if you can go 5 days in a row, or as soon as you go 15 days of, you know, turning in your homework, you're earning something desirable. So just like with this, you know, we're starting with the more frequent, more tangible, more immediate things, and over time trying to graduate students up to things that are a little bit more socially appropriate and where they have to actually kind of work and wait longer to earn the rewards. So we can be reinforcing different things. We can be reinforcing a student when the behavior doesn't happen, like, oh, you didn't get out of your seat, you didn't leave class for, you know, 20 minutes. We can reinforce other positive behaviors happening. Oh, you're completing work, or, you know, you're being really polite to your neighbor. And then we can also reinforce when the actual replacement behavior happens. So we always need to be doing this one. And then we can also be doing the other two, as long as it's not becoming overwhelming or excessive to the point that it's really disruptive. But we're always reinforcing when the student uses that replacement behavior, and then also thinking about some of these other times that we might want to reward them as well. Some key principles: reinforcing. Reinforcers should actually be reinforcing. We can't just assume that we know what is going to feel good to a student. They're all different, and at different ages and with different interest levels. We need to make sure that we're really tuned into what they like and what they want to work for. Like I said before, some students don't want positive attention from a teacher, and so giving them praise and high fives is not going to feel very good for them. So that's not going to work. We also need to know that if we are giving the same type of reward or reinforcer again and again and again, at some point they're going to kind of burn out on it. We call that satiation. It means that we have to keep things novel, keep mixing in new things so that they actually stay excited about what they're working for. we have to make sure that they can only earn the reinforcer for doing the correct behavior, right? If they really enjoy going on a certain computer game and we're going to use that as a reward, well, it's not going to mean a lot to them if they just know I can go on it when I get home, so I don't need to earn it right now. So sometimes this is where conversations with other teachers or parents come in of how can we make sure we're keeping this reward really special for the student. And we have to be consistent across all spaces so that the student really knows what's expected in order to earn what they're working towards. Something to think about, some students don't do well when they don't meet a goal and don't get a reward, and so thinking about some no-fail systems. A no-fail system might be once you get 5 days of, turning in your homework, then you earn whatever it is you want. So the student never experiences something where it's like, oh, you don't get your reward, you didn't meet the goal. It's like, oh, nope, we're just going to continue working on it until you get there. Or with like a student store system, as soon as you save up those points, you can cash them in. So it's very positive based, there's no fail. Versus, I'm going to check in with you at the end of class, and if you haven't done your work, you don't get your free time. These are not necessarily bad. I think sometimes for some students, a system where they fail can be effective and they're at a point in their development where they can handle it, but it's just needing to know if a student's going to have a full-blown meltdown if they don't earn their reward, then that's going to be really triggering. We might want to, think more of like a no-fail system so that we can keep the momentum going and saying, well, you just haven't earned it yet. We're going to keep working towards it. Whew, I feel like I talked a lot, and I'm sorry for that. I want to wrap up by just reviewing kind of where we are with this. So there's 2 things that you are submitting, and you're submitting them in the assignment section up here for assessment. It's the 10 environmental modifications, so this page, and it's the classroom analysis, so this page. So you're going to complete those 2 things and you're going to submit them here under assignments. I've also linked them here just if that makes it easier, but this is where you would submit it, is this online module, week 6. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about mental health and factors related to that, as well as looking at some actual examples of behavior plans to start generating more ideas and seeing how all of these pieces fit together. And then the following week is going to be a big full chunk of in-class work time. So looking forward to starting to bring all these things together. I know this has been a little bit content heavy, but we've gotten some information out there. You have some time to sit with it and process it, and then we're going to start using it together in the next few weeks. So enjoy your week, enjoy your Wednesday, your Valentine's Day, and I will see you all in 2 weeks. All right.